Audacity's going. Over, and hopefully we should all be live.
Hooray.
There you go, Gary.
Hooray. Hello. Okay, we'll start. I know the stream's going, so this is you seeing behind the scenes again. Woohoo! But let's do it. Hello again, and welcome to Jerks Talk Games, the podcast where some developers from various communities talk about the computer games they've been playing and other various game-related things. And today, you'll notice for the first time in a good while, this episode 20, a landmark edition, we've got our good friend and Slack stalwart, Ross Tech. Say hello, Ross.
Hello, Ross.
And of course, with me, I'm Gary Hockin, and with me is, as always, is my permanent co-host, Chris Tankersley. Say hello, Chris Tankersley.
Hello, me.
Yes, so this is another one of those episodes where Chris and Ross would like to talk about something that I have no idea about, which is 2 thumbs up from me. I always like to learn about these things. So, yeah, I guess we'll start with what we've been playing, and as the guest, Ross, you should definitely go first.
Okay. Right now, the missus and I are playing the new Shadow of the Colossus remake together. I have to say it's not quite the same as the original, but it's really, really good, and honestly, it's exciting to see it back again. And I picked up Fury, which is another boss battler, a while back. I beat it last year, but just kind of playing it again for fun. It's strange to sort of play 2 boss battlers at the same time, but it brings up some interesting parallels, so that's pretty cool. We're also playing Her Story, and I'm playing Darksiders 2 because I got it for free.
How is that? I've not had a chance to play it yet, but
It's like if The Legend of Zelda had a baby with Prince of Persia and Diablo 3.
okay.
Okay. Firstly, I don't know. I'm trying to get my head around how 3 people can have a baby, but aside from that,
It's the future, Gary. It involves many people nowadays.
I'm an old man. We all know I'm an old man. That's fine. But how the hell does that work? Prince of Persia, Zelda, and Diablo 3. Okay.
Basically, take Zelda, make the platforming sections, instead of like the simple jumping, make them basically Prince of Persia, and then make it ever-changing loot that just randomly drops, and so you're constantly changing your equips. It's a lot more linear than most Zelda. There's a little bit of a hub thing going on. Also, the main star seems to be Casey Jones from Ninja Turtles.
Oh.
But as a 14-year-old edgelord.
Okay.
It's fun. Like, I enjoy it, but I got to a certain point in the game, and I was just like, I have reached the maximum amount of fun, and everything forward in the game seems to be more of the same, so I'm just going to put it down for now. I really had fun for about 8-10 hours. It's a good beat 'em up, but have legs for the distance it wants to go.
Well, cool. So I'll go
sounds
next.
like glowing praise. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead. Go ahead, because I'm
go
still screwing with text. This is fun. I love this job.
It's fine, and also the game that you've been playing is our main topic for this entire episode. So
Did
it's
you-
probably best.
No,
if we
it's
don't, we've got a natural segue there, which is
no,
nice.
because we changed the topic, Gary.
Oh, okay, even better. Yeah.
Good job reading the notes. That's
That
good
kind
job.
of, well, I wrote the notes, so that's even worse. Yeah, I've been playing. I bit the bullet and bought Far Cry 5, the first AAA game. I don't know if the first. I think it's the first one I've paid full price for. When it first released for a long time. So. Yeah, I got sucked in. I got a new graphics card, and I wanted something to push that to the limit a little bit, and I haven't played Far Cry franchise since Far Cry 2. I really liked Far Cry 1, which was, for me, totally different from 2, 3, 4, and 5, although it may be the mists of time and making my memory kind of wrong. But for me, like Far Cry 1 was just your traditional sort of first-person shooter, slightly open world, but really you had to do the quests in the right order. It was just how you got to the next checkpoint or waypoint was kind of open worldy. But it was a really cool game. I loved it, and it turned out, oh look, it's experiments and monsters and zombies and stuff at the end. It was just whereas the more recent Far Cry games have been a lot more sandboxy, open
Yeah.
worldy type games, and I didn't get on with Far Cry 2 at all because I was expecting exactly what I had in Far Cry 1, which I really enjoyed. So this is my first time dipping back in, and I have to say I'm absolutely really, really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying it. It's the right kind of tongue-in-cheekness in a game for me. You know, it knows it's a bit cliched, and it knows it's a bit cliched for a Ubisoft game. So, yeah, I'm really, really enjoying it.
Is it as hectic as it seems like? Because like a lot of the Let's Plays, it seems like the game just never stops. Like
It's
you
insanely hectic, yeah.
you sit down and you're gonna fish, and then a cougar attacks you. You kill the cougar,
Yes.
and it turns out there's a bear behind you. Then, and it just
Well,
never seems to stop.
Even getting you think, oh, I need to go 300 meters to the next waypoint for the next quest I fancy doing, and then I'll just divert over here to rescue that person who's being held hostage, and then 6 cars, you shoot a few gunshots, and 6 cars screaming and surround you, and they all jump out, and yeah, the next thing you know, who knows where the hell you are. It's absolute mayhem, which is kind of what I really like about it, to be honest. It's totally bonkers.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Like I'm kind of tempted to get it. I just beat Far Cry 4 last year, and that was the first Far Cry I'd played since the legendarily bad one that came out for the Wii.
Oh,
Yeah, God, yeah, I'd forgotten about that one.
Yeah, it's not as bad as everyone said, I think, but it's not great. Anyways, I played Far Cry 4, and I just had so much fun with it. Like, I don't actually like open world games that much; they just feel empty and boring to me.
Mhm.
But something about 4, it just generates all this what they call emergent gameplay, but in a good way. Like, fun I had in Far Cry 4 wasn't a mission, but it's when I got a pickup truck and I just went off-roading while I was being chased by a bunch of enemies, and I had a sawed-off shotgun. Was playing the Moana soundtrack in the background. So I'm just barreling through like down the side of this hill, shotgunning people, and it's just like, you're welcome.
Yeah, I know.
It's like, and you just pull the trigger right on your welcome, and there's also something beautifully thematically correct about that with that game. But yeah, I have to admit, I'm tempted to get 5, but I'll probably wait for it to go on sale.
Was it worth £50? Probably not. I paid like nearly £50 for it. Was it worth that? So that's like €60 or $60, I guess, these days.
Yeah.
Let's not go there. Yeah, was it worth that? Probably not. Is it going to be worth it when it comes down to half the price? Absolutely. And it's the co-op. I'd love to try the co-op. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm sure when it gets down, to half price, I'll have plenty of people who fancy playing through the co-op, because that looks like it will be a ton of fun. The co-op game.
Mhm.
It's just a campaign, but you can play with 2 people. I mean, there's no kind of amazing sort of ideas or anything. It's just what a good co-op game should be, right?
yeah. That's one of the reasons I didn't pick it up. I wasn't sure if I'd like it at full price. The Let's Plays I've seen of it and the gag reels and stuff look hilarious. So I'm really super tempted to pick it up. So
How many people have you gotten with the shovel?
About only 7 or 8. I think I don't get close enough to whack people with the shovel.
no, you
I'm-
throw the shovel.
Yeah, but I don't get close enough to even get in throwing range of the shovel. I haven't. I'm the snipery type guy who, yeah, I love it. I love it. The biggest problem I have with it is that it's got slight aim assist, which I didn't realize. I just thought like all of my years of FPS have left me the most amazing gamer in the world. And then I went back to playing PUBG again, and then realized that is not true, because my anger levels went through the roof again. I mean, oh my god, that game and me have a love-hate relationship. Yeah, let's. Oh,
You gotta switch to Fortnite.
the building drives me. insane in Fortnite. The building game in Fortnite is the most stupid thing in a first-person shooter ever. I've got my eye on Radical Heights. Looks like it's going to be something pretty special in that space. It's like an 80s game show, battle royale type game. So it's like a cross between Fortnite and PUBG, but with a really massive 80s overtone, which looks really, really good. So we'll keep my eye open for that. Anyway, what have you been playing, Chris?
I have mostly been playing Nier Automata. I picked it up a couple weeks ago when it was on sale at GameStop. Like they had like a pre-owned copy that still had everything inside of it. And I put that in, and I have really all the time that I've been playing, I have just been playing that. I was talking with Ross a little bit yesterday. I am just kind of into the second playthrough of it, because you have to play the game multiple times to get all of the storyline. It's a game that even right now is already, it just makes you think and kind of question, you know, what does it mean to be alive? What are the motivations people have to just keep going? So and I've only apparently scratched the surface in some of the things, so which is why we changed the topic. We were going to talk about this originally, but Ross said no because he doesn't want to spoil it. And this is actually a game I don't think I want to be completely spoiled on. Usually I don't care, but
the only reason I picked this is to spoil it for you, so that is not so good.
I'll spoil it by playing.
Okay.
But yeah, I actually refuse to do the episode with Nier because, like, honestly, the game does have multiple playthroughs, but it's not like this sort of like padding that you would normally get. That sort of thing where you feel like you just have to stretch it. Like, I don't want to spoil anything, but playthroughs are radically different in various fashions, and honestly, at the beginning of Route B, which is what everybody calls a second playthrough, there's just I'll go so far as to say that at this point you probably don't even know what the game is about thematically. I've beaten all the story endings, so I'm a plan on my part to force y'all to bring me back for another episode, actually. So.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Is the more I get into this game, the more I'm really, really enjoying it, and it's probably the only game that's kept my attention story-wise in a really long time. So. So, but I guess with that, the one game that we decided we could spoil a little bit, despite the fact that, there's probably a bunch of people getting into this game since it was free last month. I think is it this month or last month on PlayStation Network?
Last month, I think.
Last month. So, one of the probably best PS4 exclusive games out there is Bloodborne, and I think we need to talk a little bit about kind of how we got to Bloodborne and kind of what the entire series up to that point is. But Bloodborne is probably one of the best current generation games out there, even though it's I think it's almost 3 years old now at this point, or at least 2.5 years or so. So it's made by a company called From Software. Bloodborne itself was pretty anticipated for the PS4, but From Software has been around for quite a long time. They've been around since I think it was 86, if I remember right. They used to do productivity software that must have been the worst spreadsheets imaginable, if knowing what they do nowadays.
I can't even imagine. It must have been like, that does explain a lot about their character builders, though, and the stats. Oh my god, their love of stats.
Yeah, and all of the Soulsborne series, which are kind of the Dark Souls and Bloodborne series, have a really in-depth character creator. The first game that they ever released, though, was called Kingsfield, which has kind of basically been the platform for everything that they've done thus far. So it was came out in '94. It was the very first game that they did. It was a first-person RPG, which, from what I've been seeing, is apparently the first time that someone did a first-person RPG on a console. There's stuff like Daggerfall and things like that on the computer, but I think they were the first kind of 3D one on a console, and they were pretty much a launch game for the PlayStation 1 in Japan. Ended up with
Maybe
four
the
game.
seventh guest.
Mm,
Like on the NES, it's kind of first person, like 3D in the sense of
was it a role playing game though?
I think so.
Was it okay?
I'm going by some really, really, really old Nintendo Power stuff here.
Could be. So maybe it was the first true 3D one then. Either way, I'm just quoting Wikipedia at this point because I've never actually played this game. It did, I guess, come out. Kingsfield 2 came out in the U.S., but we never got the original first one. But much like the Soulsborne games, it's really dark. The overall story is not necessarily a happy story, or even the environments, things like that. Really complicated labyrinthian dungeons, and super hard difficulty. So people have been needing to get good since 1994. The last one on that was on the PS2. That came out in 2001. After that, and I'm probably going to butcher this name, Hidetaki Miyazaki joined From Software in 2004. He did some work on Armored Core 4, and then he was kind of promoted up in From Software. So he actually came up with the basis for the Soul series and Bloodborne too. Following off of Kingsfield, they're not directly related, but they share a lot of the same kind of ideas that the Soul series gives us. That super in-depth character creator, switched it to third person, kept the sprawling, super complicated, even I don't understand half the storylines. And Ross, you said you haven't really played any of the early stuff.
Nah, I've only played. I'm a scrub. I came in later on. I played Bloodborne, and then after that, that inspired me to play Dark Souls 3, and that's kind of my From Software credentials, which is not really much. You'll find a lot of people who are really, really into this, and they're like, yeah, you have to go back to the first one, which is Demon Souls, and that's kind of a prototype for Dark Souls. The legend supposedly is that they didn't really think much of the game. They weren't sure where it was going when it was in development, and they just kind of bumped Miyazaki and they said, just finish this, do whatever you want with it. And then he produced this weird cult hit that then he got Dark Souls 2, which was actually made by a different studio, so to speak, because in the meantime, Sony contracted them to do Bloodborne.
Yep.
And it was kind of a PS exclusive.
Yeah, and
Back to Dark Souls 3.
I remember Demon Souls, like I rented it, back when we still had rental shops, running it and then hating the game. I ended up, after playing Dark Souls 2, going back and picking it back up. It's not a bad game, but it's a Souls game. So I mean, it's insanely hard. It doesn't look as bad as I thought it would be, like playing it against like the current kind of crop of games. And I think the servers for it were actually online for quite a while, because it had like the whole little note system that you could do, kind of like with the Dark Souls stuff. But from there all the way through Dark Souls 3 and then including Bloodborne, these games are super hard. Like, I remember, like, my kids don't like a lot of NES games because they are really hard to play. Because I mean, they're made off of quarter crunchers, so you have limited number of lives, and the reason you keep playing these games is you want to be able to get to the end, and getting to the end is really hard. I will admit I have not actually finished a Souls game at all because I suck at these kind of games, but they're really, really fun. So there was the Souls series has 4 games in it. Miyazaki has said he's pretty sure that franchise is done. He told the story that he wanted to tell. But basically, in those games you have a really big kingdom that kind of just fell into ruin after kind of time and events, and then so in Demon Souls you're trying to stop a fog that's turning people into demons and like bringing demons out. Dark Souls talks about an age of prosperity called the Age of Fire. Dark Souls 2, you're trying to figure out a cure for something called hollowing. And then 3, you're trying to finish off the curse and start the Age of Fire over again. So it actually turns out this is a whole cyclical thing. And some of these things kind of you see a lot in Bloodborne, which I think out of all of the games is probably my most favorite. So that came out in March 2015 for PS4. Like I said, it's a PS4 exclusive. It's a much faster paced game than the Dark Souls game. The Souls game, you really spend a lot of time guarding, waiting for an opening to attack, trying to position yourself as best as possible. And you do that in Bloodborne too, but it feels like much more of a punchier game.
So is it Twitch-based combat then? Is it?
No, it's still very strategic, but it's not as like I'm going to back up for 30, 40 seconds, wait for my opening and go.
Yeah, like in Dark Souls, you want to basically do what they call turtle up, and you keep your shield up, and then you wait for an opening and you go for it. And so it's kind of a pacing and a stamina game. With Bloodborne, you don't have a shield. The games are always played with two weapons, one in each hand more or less, or two items. In Dark Souls, it's basically almost always like a weapon and a shield, with a few, like spellcaster builds in the mix. With Bloodborne, they give you a weapon in your right hand, and you get a gun in your left hand, and it's like, don't block, shoot them in the face first. And when you're actually playing,
you're a witch hunter from the Warhammer lore, then that's nice.
Basically, like the game starts off with kind of a Dracula vibe. Like the game is about, you go to this city called Yharnam, and you're there looking for something called Pale Blood, and Yharnam is the home of what they call blood menstruation, like a special type of a healing, a special type of medicine. But when you get there, you find out that blood has various side effects, and one of them is more or less that it's turning humans into beasts. And so it starts off this kind of thing where you're using blood to become more powerful, but you don't want to turn into beasts. And so it starts off looking like this kind of vampires versus werewolves in Eastern Europe, Prague kind of. But as the game progresses, I don't think it's a really big spoiler to say that you find out that the game is not really a vampire Victorian piece.
No, not in the least.
Lovecraft. Like it's and it sneaks it up on you really well. But
it sounds really good, actually. I don't know if I could. The combat system seems like I might get on with it. I can't get on with sort of role-playing games that have combat systems that try to be too beat 'em up like, if that makes any sense to anyone but my own mind. Like The Witcher, for example, which people say is the most amazing game ever, and I'm like, I just can't get on with the combat system in that game, and that's the truth. I don't have the patience to learn. Like, either I want it to be first-person shooter type aim and shoot, and it's aim based, or I want it to be like just role-playing game based combat.
Oh, it's like turn-based combat.
Yeah, I don't want to go somewhere in between where I have to kind of counter somebody, like, which is why I suddenly stopped enjoying Monster Hunter World. By the way, that's another argument for another day. But this combat sounds like I could get on with it.
Well, counters are definitely a big part of it, but it's. Have you ever played like Devil May Cry or something like that? It's like a slower, more ponderous version. When you watch the combat, it seems kind of slow, but when you're actually playing, it feels very fast because a lot of the game relies on iframes and like dodging at the right moment. So this is kind of where it differs a lot from Dark Souls. What happens with Dark Souls is, I say, you turtle up. In Bloodborne, you dodge or you counter or you shoot. It's kind of one of the big things that differentiates it is you have what they call the rally system, where if you get hit, then you lose some blood, some life. But you can start hitting back, and all the weapons are really vicious, like saw-looking things and stuff. And so if you hit back fast enough, then you'll steal blood back from the enemy and regain some life. I also kind of love how this fits in thematically, though, because a lot of the game is about this idea of blood drunkenness, that if you partake of too much blood, then you'll go too far. You'll become a beast yourself, that you'll basically become drunk on the power it gives you. And the rally system and the way the game plays works so well thematically because it incentivizes you to become a little bit of blood drunk. If you want to play Bloodborne effectively, you have to go in with an intent to kill, and the game will egg you on. It's almost like a balance of like, how far will I attack, how long will I push my luck before I get out again, but the game will punish you for getting out. It wants you to rip and tear and break, and And
Wow.
yeah,
And I mean,
but in a strategic way.
yeah, and I mean, it sets the tone game wise too, because one of the earliest kind of like pseudo bosses that you fight is a hunter that has basically partaken too much, and you see what the consequences are really quickly in the game. But then, like Ross says, the game is egging you on to be like, if you do this, some nice things happen. But it's that balance of kind of what's going on, and then especially once you get into the actual real storyline, which is just kind of batshit crazy in some cases. Uh, it really makes sense, and I find this storyline much easier to comprehend than the Dark Souls one, but that's probably because right now it's one game and we don't have four things that we have to try to like mesh together. But once you get, probably I think it's probably about the Vicar Amelia fight, you
Hmm.
kind of start to get a hint of the game, and then sanity starts to become a thing you need to start watching for, and you get little kind of I don't think this is really super spoily, but like in one of the courtyards, if you look at the right place, you actually see some of the Lovecraftian aliens like appear, and if you're I think it's if you're too insane, they'll actually reach down and grab you, which is really
Yeah,
really weird.
it's very much that whole H.P. Lovecraft like
Yeah.
knowledge is a dangerous thing, and how do you manage it, because it's a currency that you can spend and you can
Hmm.
get things in exchange for, and they do a great job of making it very unsettling. Eyes on the inside, and it's beautifully done. Like, and the art direction is just fantastic. Like, it feels like some kind of combination of Vienna and Prague, and the architecture is just absolutely wonderful. It's really really good. It has some amazing set pieces, but the big attraction for many people, of course, is the boss fights. It's not a boss rush game. The environments are sometimes more deadly than the bosses, but the bosses are basically walls, and you'll fight them. And especially like in the beginning, this was my first Soulsborne game, and I got up to the third boss, which is the Blitzer Beast,
Hmm.
and I'm not kidding. I died to that thing 50 times in a row because I hadn't figured out, and I mean that literally 50. And I just hadn't figured out how the game only played. I was coming at it with this kind of Zelda perspective of, oh, there's a trick, there's a gimmick. If I figure out the gimmick for the boss or use this item, then I will unlock the victory condition. But there is no. You learn strong fundamentals. You play to the fundamentals, and you're always on the edge of your seat. Like, it's like I said, when you watch it, it looks slow. Like, oh, how could you not see that coming? But when you're playing, it feels lightning fast.
Yeah, and
And
this is probably one of the most beautiful games on PS4. The when you get up in some of the higher levels of the city, the draw distance is huge for one. And one thing that's wonderful about all of the Souls games is if you can see somewhere, you can probably get there. The architecture in Bloodborne, like Ross said, is just this beautiful Victorian inspired gothic. It looks dark and foreboding, and it puts all that off. All of the character, not character creation, but all the character designs, from the monsters to the what few sane people you see to the bosses themselves, are probably some of the best game design and visual design I think I have in any of the PlayStation 4 games. And there's a lot of really pretty PS4 games out. And Bloodborne, even though it's an older title at this point, is still probably graphically one of the best games out there. I like it even better than like Horizon Zero Dawn, which I think is a beautiful game.
yeah, it's
So
just better. It wins on art direction.
Yeah.
so how roleplay is this? Is there like loads of directions you can build your character into, or is it like more you just get stronger, but overall, or can I make a build? Can I play my own style, or how does that work?
There's so much in terms of builds. Like, now, Dark Souls 2 is considered, I think, like the pinnacle of build bonanza. Like, you can do anything with it. Now in Bloodborne, there's a handful of like really good viable builds that people typically go into, but the sheer number of stats and the way you can stack things and build characters, and there's some random drops for stat bonuses and stuff. Like, you can really do a lot of things. The only downside I think to it is that changing your character after the fact, upgrade materials are sort of in limited quantities, and stat points are difficult to obtain over time. Like you sort of need to make a decision relatively early in the game, like in the first quarter, about which way you want to go, and then you're kind of committed.
Yeah,
and I do wish that they gave you access to some of the weapons, because the weapons, they don't have a huge variety of them, but they're all trick weapons. They transform into multiple forms, and you get very intimate with them because the hit boxes and the hurt boxes are really tight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and during the character creation, like you kind of set up and you say like, I'm going to be someone who wields big heavy weapons, and I'm going to be slower, but I'm going to do more damage. Or you can do like magic usery kind of things, and you kind of plan your character at the outset. And like Ross says, you don't. It's not like Skyrim where halfway through you can decide like, oh, I want to do magic now. You kind of need to decide, I want to go that route versus quick close quarters fighter or things like that. And so you can pick a play style that works best for you. You're not kind of locked into just dumping stats into different things, and that's how you do your build as you go. Like, you all start on a level playing field and you build it out that way. You kind of start off with an idea, and then you just make that idea stronger as you go. And yeah, you kind of pick a set of weapons that you like and enjoy, and then just kind of go from there. There's lots of builds online you can go look up and kind of get yourself going, and what's the best armor for this build, what's the best weapon for this build, and stuff like that.
It sounds cool. I'm intrigued. I mean, it's 30 pounds at the moment on PlayStation Store, but I'll probably pick that up fairly soon. I haven't played on the PlayStation for a while, so it's about time. So yeah, I'm intrigued.
Well, you're gonna be in for some masochism then. Like, it is a brutally hard game. It is an experienced gamer, but I wouldn't consider myself a great gamer. But it's hard. Like, and some of the resources are limited. That's one of the few complaints I have about the game. Like, the blood vial system, where you have a limited number of health refills you can carry at a time, but they're also a limited consumable, is very controversial. I think it, again, works thematically in the sense of making blood a precious commodity, and you have to get it from people. You sort of, I think, then understand how the world became to the state that it's in, if it's a limited commodity. But it frustrating at times.
Yeah.
But it's hard. Like, there's just no other word for it. You'll get crushed, and the reset times to get back to the bosses can be infuriating.
Yeah, you quickly learn your way around and what things you can dodge and where things are as you try to run back to, the boss for the 20th time. And you know that, okay, if I get this far over, there's going to be a guy that jumps out from over here and do that. Or I can ignore these dogs that are in these cages because they're not going to do anything but alert other people as I kill them and let people catch up. It's, like I said, I don't think it's as hard as the Dark Souls game, but that does not diminish how hard the game itself actually is. It's it can be a very frustrating game. Like, I know my oldest son probably will never enjoy these games because he gets frustrated very easily, and this is a game that will just crush you until you figure out how to do that boss fight. This game is going to crush you, and you're going to do that boss fight many times.
And even when you do think you know how to beat the boss, you'll find that it's not enough to just know. You also have to have top-notch execution for a lot of it.
Yeah.
The other part of it too is that it's, as you say, like, you learn to pick your battles carefully. It's like if H.P. Lovecraft wrote Groundhog's Day. And
that is the best description for this game ever.
Yeah, you learn how to manipulate the loop a little bit better. And then the other thing that all the Souls games do is that you have to understand very quickly that dying is not a failure condition. No. Dying is a natural part of the process that has trade-offs and things like that. But if you go into it and every time you die it feels like a failure condition, then you'll just become discouraged, especially because the beginning of the game is so brutally hard. It's like arguably the opening area is the hardest part of the game. But yeah, like, basically the trick for the opening area is just run. Just run. Like, just try and get away. You have to escape. Like, that's the only real way, unless you know some of the shortcuts. Quality of the writing overall is really solid. That matters a lot to me. I love the world building. I love how they drop you into it. I love the layering of it, and I also love how they subvert a lot of the tropes. Lovecraft,
Mm-hmm.
for example, is infamously racist. This does a nice job of sort of turning it on its head, where it's not the crude, primitive people who are causing the terrible events, but in fact, a more elite class who can't deal with their own deficiencies,
Yeah,
and I like that subversion.
yeah, because you end up with, you have the city of Yarnum's not like a mud pit. It's a very, like I said, very beautifully designed city, and then you have two major factions in there: the Healing Church, and then the University of Bergenworth, which are top tier places in society, and it turns out they're the ones that are ultimately causing all of this between the blood healing and then the stuff that Bergenworth and the Mensa scholars are getting into
Yeah.
knowledge wise, and it's kind of it ends up being the trickle down effect. It's really crazy at the top, and then it goes insane the further down you get, as these
I
kind
would
of
even argue
horrors
that from
are.
a s-
Oh, go ahead.
I would even argue from a storyline perspective that there's actually like five or six factions
Mm-hmm.
tossing around here, and a lot of it's open for interpretation. Uh, Miyazaki, the director, I read an interview one time. He says that when he was a kid, he would read books that he didn't always understand what all the words were because he didn't know the kanji or they were English, and so he would just read the story and then he wouldn't understand two or three paragraphs, and he would just have to kind of fill in what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And on the one hand, that explains so much about his writing style, and there is so much fun to be had in the lore crafting of it, and there's a huge community around it for all the Souls games. But at the same time, I also wonder sometimes if it cheapens the experience, because part of the fun with lore crafting is finding the bits and pieces and going to a particular direction until you sort of find an interlocking, internally consistent theory of the universe, or of how the game works. But sometimes I worry that when I'm playing the game that he didn't have an explanation, that there is no meaning to this. It's just in there because it looks cool. End of Evangelion
Mm-hmm.
syndrome.
Yeah.
You know,
And it's really easy
and
to miss things too, because of the way the lore is kind of dished out to you. You find bits and pieces. Some of the lore is just in like the interstitial descriptions of items. As you've got loading screens, or you have to go in and read uh, the descriptions of items to pick things up, which does help fill in some of the gaps. But yeah, I think sometimes it's like, this is cool. We'll figure out a way to make it. We'll shoehorn it in. The community will come up with a way that it all works, and we'll just kind of nod our heads and say, yes, this is what we intended.
yeah. On the other hand, though, I will say that if you played the Old Hunters, which is the DLC
Mm-hmm.
for Bloodborne, it's one of the best pieces of DLC I've ever seen. It's just absolutely fabulous in every respect. So much of what's in there ties in with what we see in the main game that I can't help but wonder if this is the actual storyline. Like, just some of it fits so well. Like, either they came up with some beautifully clever ways of like resolving it after the fact, but it almost like it completes the thing just so well, and it ties in so well. Like again, back to the Lovecraftian aspect of it, and there's a really interesting couple of YouTube folks about this. So I was watching one with a name that you would like called Jerk Sans Frontiers, and he has a theory about how, especially the Old Hunters, is based on the concept of Buddhist hell, and
Oh,
it's
okay.
it's just fabulous. Like it explains again quite a bit of what's going on, and
Mm-hmm.
I love how multi-layered it is, and
Yeah, it was very fun because I got this game a couple of days after it came out, and watching the Bloodborne subreddit like piece things together even over all these years as little things just came up. It's incredibly deep, and like I said, I like this story much better than I do the Dark Souls ones, and it's, I think, much, in a way, much more straightforward and clear to understand when you sit down and you read all the lore. Uh, I like I said,
clear is relative. But
it's clearer than some of the Dark Souls stuff. It's not quite as straight. It's not as straightforward as Zelda, uh, but it's a much more easier to digest lore when you look at it put together than some of the Dark Souls stuff. Uh,
it's so really well told story, especially if you're familiar kind of with the other stuff around it and the tropes it's playing off of. If you weren't aware of that, I think then you should probably go read like Shadow over Innsmouth or a couple of Lovecraft stories. But on the other hand, I think part of the thing is not knowing that it's a Lovecraft thing when you begin. It feels like Underworld Victorian edition when you start, and I love that. And then like the very first time you come across like a kin enemy like in the forest or whatever, you're just like, what the hell is that?
And they did do a very good job of making the Lovecraftian things like just weird, and I don't want to say scary, but they're grotesque. Yes. But they make sense for what they are, and it is kind of fun because I've played a lot of Call of Cthulhu RPG and read a lot of the stuff, so you can actually kind of pick out where they got some of the inspiration for a lot of these monsters. But it's just such a beautiful game, and like I said, the art direction is just amazing. I'll keep coming to that just because it is such a beautiful game.
Yeah, the last game I can think of that just pure art direction that made such a big impact on me is like Wind Waker would be up there. There's some really lovely pixel indie games and stuff like that that really make an impact. But this one just sticks with you, and it plays really well. The best recommendation I can give for the game is that I started playing it because I wanted to play something in a genre I'd never done before. So I picked this up, and I tried it for a little bit, and then I put it down, and I picked it up again, and I just kind of staggered my way through the first couple bosses. And like I said, I didn't really get how it worked. And then at a certain point, I don't want to say I became kind of obsessed with it, because I became kind of obsessed with it. And like that thrill of victory, like when was the last time you played a game where you would make a kill and then you would literally get up and like do a victory dance in your living room? Because that's really what it is, and you get better, and that reward cycle for that is amazing.
Every time you play PUBG.
Time I play PUBG, even if I knock someone, I dance around the living room. I feel ya.
But the difference I would say with PUBG is that like every time PUBG you start, like you get better and you have that feedback loop. But I started off literally dying to a boss 50 times, and then by the end of the game, I would get to some of the most notoriously the hardest bosses in the game, and I would beat them in a single try. And these are things that like you'll see people online complain that they've had over 100 attempts on. And it's not because I'm good, but it's just everybody has a different experience with it. Yeah. But the only game on PlayStation that I've platinumed, I've gotten every trophy for that game, and it was a hell of a ride.
I applaud you for that, because I do not know how in the world I would ever get platinum on this game. It's one of the few games that I think invokes the feeling of like early video game, like in beating them. Like I remember so many times playing a Nintendo game, and like the first time you beat Contra, you're in a room with a friend, and you finally beat this game, and it's just this huge celebration. And then Bloodborne gives you these gifts of congratulations, you did manage to do it. Good luck next time, because you're gonna want to play this game again, which really makes it amazing to watch speedrunners play this game. And I know they kind of break it in some ways, but to watch them do like no glitch runs and how quickly they can defeat some of these enemies, and they're still kind of at the mercy of RNGesus, where you learn how to kite and work off of their attacks, but their attacks don't always come in the same order. And so the skill you can get and build up is amazing.
I think the world record now for with a couple small glitches is like under 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's if you do, like, there's a lot of extra side content. Like, there's a few areas which are just purely optional. And if you skip those, then you'll blaze through pretty quick. I think, like, if you were good and you had experience, and especially if you've beaten Souls, then you could probably beat just the main story in 8 to 10 hours, 8 to 12 hours. But especially like me, if this is your first attempt at this kind of genre, there is no way in hell you will beat this game in under 8 hours.
Oh, no, I have a huge amount of time in this game, and I'm nowhere near... I think I'm about 3/4 of the way through the game, and I mean, I don't know how many hours I've sunk into this so far.
Have you got the DLC?
I have it, but I've not played it.
it's worth doing at least the early areas because there's some really really good fun weapons in there. Like the only complaint I have really like coming back to the game again, like I did recently, is that some of the most fun weapons for replayability, like the whirligig saw or the church pick, things like that. They're just a little bit further in than maybe you can go early game. So that's kind of a bummer. I think it's kind of interesting too, like in just a different sense, real quick, to say that like there's a lot of really good boss rush games, like I said, Shadow of the Colossus, Fury, and there's some common elements there. Of like with Shadow of the Colossus and Fury, jealousy is a theme. Well, not jealousy, but selfishness is a theme. Like you see kind of appear because a good boss rush game gives you some level of intimacy. Like with Fury, I played it because I got it for free, and I just thought it'd be fun to try a boss rush game. But what really struck me was the story with it, like how intimate your short relationship with each boss is, and that's wonderful, just wonderful, I think. And the same thing with Shadow of the Colossus, you get a feel for what you're fighting, and I think that's one of the things that unfortunately changed in the new visual language. So with Shadow of the Colossus, I know this is getting way off topic, but with Shadow of the Colossus in the old visual style, when you looked up at a Colossus, you would often see it as kind of a silhouette. It was really far away.
Right.
But then when you would start climbing it, you would get up close, you would see their fur and the little details and things like that. You would gain intimacy with the boss before you killed it. It became more of a living thing the closer you got to murdering it. With the new visual style, the detail is so good that you kind of lose that progression. Same thing with Fury, you start off with a very selfish perspective and you move towards more and more selfless individuals. Not that to spoil anything, but it's really good in that sense. With Bloodborne, you have some of that element of boss rush, but because the world is so hostile and so different, that you don't really have a chance to become intimate with any of these things. Some of them are just creatures, and not even in a fun, snuggly, death-floof way. And I find it interesting that they can still make it compelling, but I wonder if they could make it compelling if it was only a boss rush game and not a whole world around it. Like the storytelling would be placed differently.
Yeah, I don't think it would have quite the same impact just because the bosses I think the bosses fit really well in this world, and I don't think they would have the same impact that they would in the places that they're in if it was like a Shadow of Colossus like game where you were mostly worried about the bosses and there wasn't that kind of struggle to get to and from each boss. So I kind of like that it's not strictly a boss rush game. The bosses are a big part of it, but they're not the only struggle that you have. And I love Shadow of Colossus, and I think that game it plays excellently, like that whole style of gameplay. But I think Bloodborne does have a really good setup where you have the entire world is a struggle. Just some of the struggles are more hard than others, and that doesn't mean all the bosses are hard. Sometimes just some of the areas are hard. Because, like you said, sometimes you'll breeze through a boss that looks hugely intimidating, but you may struggle in just the city area around it, and that's enough to get it going. I think the whole thing needs to be there for it to be a good experience from a Bloodborne perspective.
The hostility, actually, the environment's an interesting one too. Also, as sort of a subversion of Lovecraft. Now that you mention it, like it's made very, very clear when you enter the city that they don't like outsiders. Mm-hmm. So immediately you're on the receiving brunt of racism, and you really feel that like from the beginning of the game. And then they sort of extrapolate that theme arguably to when you get to the Lovecraftian elements, that you're not the only citizens of this universe, multiverse, whatever it is, and the other entities there have their own thing going on, and they have definite opinions about you and what you are to them.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's again just shockingly clever, I think, in representation and the stuff around it.
Cool. I'm intrigued. I mean, on the one hand, as one of the world's worst gamers, I feel like this is not the game for me. On the other hand, the person who has the least patience with any game. Again, this is probably not the best for me. If I'm gonna suck hard at it and not have the patience to get good at it, then yeah, maybe this isn't for me. But the story and the visual elements and the stuff you've described, you know, is intriguing. So perhaps I'll wait to see if it comes down again. I mean, there's no doubt going to be another PlayStation sale in the next, 18 months or whatever. Maybe I'll pick it up then. It sounds really cool. The only point I wanted to make is on our notes here, the only intriguing bullet point on the whole of the notes neither of you covered, and that's the last point, which says you turn into a slug. So yeah, I mean, is that just to troll me, or is that like a genuine point you wanted to make?
You'll have to play the game to find out, Gary.
Oh, okay.
Nothing to say.
It's one of those. It's one of those moments. Well, we've been going for nearly an hour, so we'll wrap up there. Thank you so much, Ross. I'm glad we had you on. I wanted to have you on one of these episodes for a long time. A good friend of ours, and always good conversation in the Jerks Talk Games Slack, which is sadly, it's slow to stop at the moment, but we do have some good conversations in there. So jump into the Slack. You can find information on that at jerkstalkgames.com. You'll find Ross on Twitter at RossTuck, ROSSTUCK. You can find me on Twitter at GHGWH. Chris, you can find at Dragonman Tank as usual, and you can find the podcast at Jerks Talk Games. Thank you very much for joining us on episode 20. Came quick off the heels of episode 19. We only apparently needed to start recording again for me to actually get the buzz and not cancel recording dates. So that's a good thing.
We're 2 for 0, or however it works. We've gotten 2 in the bag so far.
Yeah, that's good. That's so nothing all of 2018 and then 2 in a fortnight. That's 2 weeks for you, Chris. Yeah,
I know what a fortnight is.
That's pretty good. So thanks very much for joining us, and we'll catch you soon.
Yep, praise the sun. Wait, no. Don't forget to save your game. Whichever one it is. Do one of those two. Do both those things. Okay. So now we're going
I stopped
to...
recording. Thank you, Ross. That was amazing.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
That was amazing. Amazing.